Hello, and welcome to Cover to Cover Books for Young Readers Middle Grade Author Panel. We're so pleased you could join us tonight for this live discussion with 5 talented middle grade authors from across Ohio. This special event is brought to you in partnership with the Ohioana Library and the 2020 Ohioana Book Festival, which will be taking place virtually August 28th through 30th. Before we get started, I want to thank the Ohioana Book Festival sponsors and partners, all of whom you can find listed on the Ohioana website. And now I'm very pleased to welcome our special guest authors, Jenn Bishop, Dustin Brady, Tamara Bundy, Polly Farquhar, and Jason R. Lady, as well as our panel moderator, Bryan Loar, who's the general manager of Cover to Cover Books for Young Readers. And now for some brief introductions, just to get us started. Jenn Bishop is the author of the middle grade novels, including 14 Hollow Road and The Distance to Home, which was a Junior Library Guild selection and a Bank Street College Best Children's Book. She is originally from New England, but now resides in Cincinnati. Her featured festival title is her 3rd middle grade novel, Things You Can't Say. Next to Dustin Brady. And Dustin writes funny, action-packed books for kids, including his featured festival title, Trapped in a Video Game. With a title like that, it will come as no surprise to you that he still remembers the Super Mario Bros. 3 Game Genie code for infinite lives. Dustin joins us from Strongsville, Ohio. Up here to Tamara. Tamara Bundy is a former columnist for the Cincinnati Post and now teaches English at Miami University. Her middle grade novel, Walking with Miss Millie, won several awards, including the 2018 Ohioana Book Award for middle grade young adult literature. Her featured festival title is her 2nd middle grade novel, Pixie Pushes On. All right, and let's see, we've got Polly in the middle of my screen. So we've got Polly Farquhar, grew up in upstate New York before moving to the Columbus area and earning her MFA in creative writing from The Ohio State University. Her writing for adults has been published in literary magazines, and her featured festival title, Itch, is her debut middle grade novel. Like Isaac, the main character in Itch, she has idiopathic angioedema, and I apologize if I said that wrong, and didn't know much about OSU football until she moved to Ohio. And last, but of course not least, we have Jason R. Lady, and he comes from a military family and spent his childhood moving 7 times across military bases from Fort Knox, Kentucky to Germany. He now lives in Cleveland, where he received his Master's of Education from Cleveland State University. His featured festival title is his debut middle grade novel, Monster Problems. So thank you so much for joining us all tonight. We really are totally across Ohio too. We're kind of just encompassing the whole state tonight, which is extra exciting. So thank you so much for joining us, and I'll turn it over to Bryan.
Well, good evening, authors. Good evening, attendees. Thanks so much for being here tonight. What a treat it is to have everybody here together, even though we are completely distanced, like Catherine said, all across the state. We can enjoy each other's company for this next hour. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to change it up in a little bit in regards to doing a little bit of a round robin. We'll start off with some questions at the beginning and then move over into Q&A like a typical event. And I would just, I would really love to know, you know, a quick soundbite of each of your featured titles for Ohioana, along with how that is either how you see that positioned within children's literature today or in the past. I thought we could start off in this time alphabetically by first name. So that would bring up Dustin. If you could speak a little bit about your either your featured title or your series altogether, and like I mentioned, how that's positioned within children's lit. That would be wonderful.
Sure. Yeah, no problem, Bryan. Thanks. Thanks for having me again. So yeah, my featured title is Trapped in a Video Game. I, for whatever reason, don't have it on my desk right now. So, but Bryan, I saw you had a copy, so that's great. So that's what the cover looks like. So a little bit of a background about the book. I wrote it 4 years ago, and I wrote it to be like my favorite book when I was 10 years old. So I made a list when I was sitting down to write it of all the things that I loved the most when I was 10. And at the top of that list was this game show called Nickelodeon Arcade. And at the end of that game show, the kids that won would get to go through this door. The door would open, smoke would pour out, and these kids would go inside of the door. A screen would turn on, and they're inside a 1990s video game. And I saw it one time because I didn't have cable, but my friend down the street, Anthony Laporta, did, so he was cool. And I saw it at Anthony's house, and it just blew my mind. I'm like, this is the most amazing thing in the world. And so I wanted to. So I thought, I would think if I could go back in time and give myself a book, like that's the book that I want to give myself. So I wrote that one. It did well, and I published 5 books in that series. And so the books are, it says what it's about, trapped in a video game. It's not going to win great literature awards probably, but it is a fun book, and I stand behind it because it would be, again, my favorite book when I was 10 years old. And it's really connected with reluctant readers, which has been really neat to see. So, I get notes from parents and teachers all the time where this is the first book that their kid has read cover to cover on their own independently, and it's given them the confidence to go forward and read other books, and they discover that they actually like reading now. So that's where I see my book in my series in there, and I've tried to kind of take that, the mission of reaching reluctant readers. And continued it. I did bring this book. This is one I did have. So this is the next series I have, Escape from a Video Game, is coming out next week, actually. And so this is a choose your own adventure type of story, and it's really interactive. And it gets the kids even more involved. So it feels even more like playing a video game, again, to try to reach that reluctant reader demographic.
Dustin, thank you so much for sharing. I have to say that I don't know whether it was because all of a sudden we weren't sure whether we were going to have access to literature or whatnot, but when at the very beginning of when things started shutting down, there was a huge rush on your Trapped in a Video Game series.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, it's been during the pandemic, the one good thing for me, it does seem like it's really opened up. A lot of kids have discovered the book through, parents just looking for something for their kid to read. So it's been really neat to see these last couple of months of response.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Jason, you're up next.
Sure. So writing in general is something I've always been interested in. You guys heard earlier that I came from a military family. We moved around a lot. So moving to a new place was always my opportunity to obviously make new friends, but bring people together by featuring them in my stories. I'd always incorporate my friends into my stories. I kind of went from comic strips like Garfield and stuff like that when I was a little kid, graduated to like drawing my own comic books. And then in high school I got too impatient with drawing. So it's not, it's taking too long to write the story by time to draw all the pictures too. So I ended up just filling up these giant spiral bound notebooks with stories. And one of them was a parody of Robin Hood that had all my friends in it in high school, and it got passed around on the bus. And that's really where it started to hit me, like, I wonder if I could do something with this someday. So in college, I minored in creative writing and moved to Cleveland, got married shortly before that, and just kept working on it. A lot of manuscripts I was writing, they were more for older audiences, and they kind of weren't going anywhere. I wasn't really satisfied with them. And my wife suggested to me, why don't you write a book about a boy with a magic pen, and everything he draws with it becomes real? That sounds like a cool idea. And I was like, yeah, that does. So I took it and ran with it. I joined the Society for Children's Books Writers and Illustrators, and just learned a lot about, the business of publishing a book, getting a book out there, and all of that. But through that process, I got the manuscript done. And so here we are 13 years later. I got it published last December, actually. So it was a long process of being persistent and working on it. But Monster Problems, I'll hold it up again. like I said, it's about a boy with a magic pen. Everything he draws with it becomes real. And he draws a monster he envisions going after his little brother that he's angry with. And he didn't know that at the time that the monster was going to become real. And when it does, he's really freaked out. And he has to figure out what to do about the monster problem. And it's pretty similar to Dustin's books where in terms of the tone, that kind of like fun adventure story, it's got a lot of kind of absurd, goofy, wacky humor in it that kids like. But what I like about writing for this age group, and really where I feel like I've really hit my wheelhouse with this age group, is that you can have that fun stuff in there that I like to put in the story, but I also like the plot. I like to do character development. So you can have all of that in there and your audience is really going to appreciate the whole package that you have there. So that's kind of where I see it sitting is, you know, kids that like a fun adventure story that kind of sweeps them up and kind of ignites their imagination and intrigues them, but also makes them laugh along the way. And, you know, similar to Dustin, I love hearing the feedback about the book when kids and parents are like, wow, it made my kid laugh, or a kid is like, hey, it made me laugh, or I thought it was a really cool book. I couldn't put it down. It really swept me along. I really like seeing that and hearing that feedback. So I think that's where my book sits.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for sharing. Jenn, could you share a little bit, please?
Sure. So Things You Can't Say is the first, it's my third book, but it's the first book I wrote from the point of view of a boy. I think with each book you want to find like a new challenge. So this book is all set in one summer. Drew lost his father to suicide 3 years before the book begins, but this book picks up when a mysterious man on a motorcycle arrives into town and Drew becomes obsessed with the idea that this man could be his real father. So it's both an emotional story and a mystery. And I was in this class that Kate Messner's been teaching for the last week about how to do virtual author visits. And I heard a wonderful pivot from like the idea of books that deal with topics like suicide from being like tough topics to essential topics. So that's the way I'm going to frame stories like this now. And I think it'd be a great one for readers who enjoy books by like Barbara D. and Kate Messner and other authors, Paula Chase, that delve into these sort of like essential topics that for a while you would find in young adult literature, but that you wouldn't see as commonly in middle grade.
Great, thank you, Jenn. Well, Polly, that means that you're up next.
All right. Well, here's Itch. It's a story about friendship, I think, and doing the right thing and trying to do the right thing when you don't exactly know what the right thing is yet. The main character, Isaac, is trying to find his way in a new place, which is Ohio, kind of set in an imaginary Northwest Ohio. And so it's a new place, Ohio, with all its football hype. And with a condition that makes him itchy and swell up in hives and all sorts of stuff. So that's an added challenge, and everybody calls him Itch. Everybody except his best friend Sydney, they call him Itch because of this, and he just wants to be a regular kid. And then one day, one of his classmates asked him to steal a pheasant from the pheasant farm where he works, which is not something he would normally do. But one day it feels like it's his only option. And where does it fit in children's literature? I thought that was a very hard question. It's realistic, it's contemporary. I think it's funny. It's got some serious stuff going on. So there's characters with food allergies, and Itch has his issues. So I kind of like to think of it maybe as a little bit of funny Gary Schmidt, maybe meeting up a little bit with something like Fish in a Tree. And if you're thinking about football in the fall, Big Ten football, which we won't have at the start of school, this kind of has some Big Ten football, but I think not too much, that if you're not into football, it's not going to be a problem. And it's before the book opens, there's a tornado that destroys the school cafeteria. So part of the issue is all the kids are eating their lunches in the classrooms or various places around the school, which wasn't something I thought was going to end up being an issue for kids, but now it is, because kids are going to be eating lunch in their classrooms, and which is actually potentially kind of a big issue for kids with food allergies. So I don't know. I feel like I didn't exactly answer your question, but I feel like it was a very tricky question.
I do understand that I put all of you on the spot, especially with like, all right, tell me how you feel about your book, how it fits within the canon of children's literature. I totally understand that. But I will say this, I think your book has a authenticity and sincerity to it with the way that you've written it. It's just really beautiful. So thank you for
Oh,
your
thank
art.
you. Thank you very much.
And Tamara, please do share.
Well, everybody's book sounds fascinating, and I know I've read a couple, so I'm excited about the rest. This is Pixie Pushes On. It's my second middle grade novel with Nancy Paulson, and this one takes place in World War II times. It's about a girl named Pixie who her mother has passed away, and she goes to live with her grandparents on their farm in Indiana, and she's just dealing with a lot of loss. Her sister gets polio, and she has to go away to the hospital. And one of the things that I got from my own mom's childhood, who grew up during that time, was she had this lamb, and this lamb became like a dog to her. It would follow her around, help her with the chickens, and do her chores with her. And yet on a farm, we all know that lambs really aren't pets. And so from being a child, my mom would tell me this story, and as a city kid, I would be mortified and say, wait, what? Grandpa made you do what? And I just always knew I was going to tell a story about my mom's lamb. So that happens to Pixie as well, that she gets this lamb that helps her learn to trust and love again. But then, you know, of course, there are some other things to deal with that too. When I wrote it, I had no idea that the polio epidemic would be so pertinent as it is now, with all the fears, and, you know, we can't go to movie theaters and we can't. So it was interesting that the stigma that the polio virus had and what's going on now with quarantine. So it was an interesting tie-in that I did not intend, and nor did I want. But it's made, I was allowed to do a read aloud of it, and it's on YouTube. And so I felt, as I taught school for 20 years, and I just knew what read alouds are for these kids. And I just felt so bad that when so many teachers went to online, and they didn't, at the time we weren't sure what the copyrights were going to allow. So I was allowed to do a YouTube link. And I've been so touched to hear from teachers who say that the kids are connecting to it, and they're making their own connections about what they're going through. And it's really been, you know, just such a gift to me to hear from them, especially in a time when we can't meet, we can't do school visits, and it's just so great to hear from them. So I think that anybody, historical fiction is what this is, but I think that the thing I love so much about history and historical fiction is that it really reflects on what we're going through today, and you know, we always learn from the past. So I think that there's a little bit of humor in it, as well as the heart, but I just love hearing the individual students' take on it.
Yeah, so a couple of times, thank you so much, Tamara, for sharing. And thank you all as well. Yeah, so it's come up a couple of times now, and I thought we'd kind of explore it a little bit more in regards to how this pandemic has changed how authors are either promoting their books, or how you're working with whether it's bookstores like us, or other indie bookstores, how the pandemic is either affecting the way you work individually, or how you are working with others in the industry. Why don't we go in reverse order? So Tamara, since you talked a little bit about this, tell me about some of the things that you might have had to have changed or address.
Yeah, I think that that doing the read aloud has been such a gift to me, because I think we love going to classrooms, we love meeting the kids, we love going to book festivals, we love going to bookstores, and take that away, we're just the crazy people behind the computer writing these stories. And so it really is a work in progress. We're all trying to figure out what is the best way to do this. We're talking to teachers. I'm somewhat not fond of social media from anything things, but I love Twitter for hearing what teachers need, to hear what they're looking for. And it's been such a great connector for that type of thing. So when I hear, teachers asking for things, and we can, all of so many, the writing community is just so amazing. They're always stepping up saying, yes, call me, we can do this, we can Zoom. And I think that that's the main thing, is that all of us, to different levels of, free Zoom visits versus, charging. I think most of us just want to connect. So we're trying to figure it out. That read aloud was just such a, such a new thing to try, but it's been received so well, and I'm still offering it. It's a private link. If anybody wants it, it's there. But I think, just reaching out to teachers and saying, what do you need? How can we help you? I think that we're all just, it's an airplane, and we're all building it as it's in flight, and we're trying to figure it all out.
Absolutely. Polly, have you had anything that you've had to change up?
Well, I don't know. This was my debut, and it came out a little bit before the pandemic. So I had the event at cover to cover, and that was it. I got to go to my local Barnes and Noble and sign some books. They didn't even check my ID. I could have probably gone in and said I was somebody famous. I'm like, don't you want to compare the author photo? But so I don't really know what I should have been doing anyway. I feel like I'm luckier than people who debuted right in the middle of it, because there was time to do a little bit of stuff. So I haven't done too much. I don't really know what I'm doing. And I think it kind of really drives home the point that the only thing you can control is your writing, which people tell you all the time. Somebody's going to read your book, and what they think of it is what they think of it. And it's out of your hands. So that's really kind of driven home the point, I think, that you can control your writing and I guess your social media, and update your website, and just, read lots of books. So I haven't done too much. So.
Great points, though. Great points to take home. Jen, how about you?
Yeah, I really feel for Polly and really every debut. It's a really challenging time to have a book come out and get attention that first time around. My last book had come out in 2017, so I was so excited to have a new book come out in 2020. And then I basically had my launch party. I went to a sold out Bearcats basketball game in High Five Strangers. And that was the last time I was in the world. Everything else shut down. The last book festival I was going to was March 13th. That got called on March 12th or something. And then it just everything just got canceled. Everything I imagined. I recently opened up the Word document with all these plans I had for the summer and how I was going to be, out visiting my in-laws on this island and back in Massachusetts and in Rhode Island. And it's I've been here. So, but it is great that we, compared to 10, 15 years ago, we have other ways of communicating. I find that Twitter is really useful, although sometimes it can be a lot. And, trying to set up virtual visits. I've already had a library in California request a virtual visit for this fall. I haven't been advertising virtual things. I'm trying to figure out what to offer and how that would work. My MO has always been, as the former public librarian, that I want to offer something for free. That doesn't take much time out of me, because I think some of those connections are so important, and I know that a lot of budgets will be really small. But I'll be curious to see what the year holds. I have another book coming out in March. So I'm I guess I'll have a book come out at the beginning of the pandemic, hopefully the end of the pandemic, and then maybe, hopefully, there's eventually an end to this. But I think Polly's so right. All you can control is working on the next book. And so the bulk of my time, promoting just kind of went out the window. It was well, what can I work on? It's my new book that's set in Cincinnati. That is what my focus has been for most of this year.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, Jen. Jason?
Sure. So I'm in a very similar boat as Polly and Jen. My first book came out at the very end of December. And luckily, I had a couple months there where I was able to get a few book events in before everything happened with the pandemic. I had a really good book launch party. I spent a lot of last fall building relationships with my local bookstores up here in Cleveland, as well as one in Perrysburg, Book Loft in Columbus. And was able to do book events at most of them in January and February, my local Barnes and Noble and a few others. And, was doing really well. I was doing well in the regards of, there were people coming in to the bookstore and they would just happen to find me there. and I would happen to talk to them. And, you know, I'm not a big name. I'm not someone where people are going to say, outside of friends and family, you know, they're not going to say, oh, I'm going to go see Jason Lady, you know. So I was really doing well with the people coming in with their kids or just by themselves, like a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or a parent, looking for something for their kids and telling them about my book. It was, you know, doing really well that way, and was pretty excited. There was a Cleveland area sci-fi fantasy convention that was going to have an author's alley in it. So I had a lot of my own author copies there that I was going to sell at that event. That was supposed to be the week right when the pandemic hit. So that got completely canceled. You know, we're not doing an in-person Ohioana event. So kind of like you guys, I had plans for the year and they just got drastically upended. And I was just left like, my first book just came out. Like, why does this have to happen now? And, you know, there's people out there with way bigger problems than me, you know, than that. But it was a bummer. It was really a sad thing. And so what I've tried to do is really change gears. I recorded myself in installments reading monster problems on YouTube and promoted that on my social media. I got some hits there with people viewing that. And something I'm trying to do right now is get monster problems reviewed by people who either have a YouTube channel where they review books or they have a book blog, get interviewed. I've gotten some traction there, but trying to, me as someone who doesn't have you know, much of a following right now, to tap into the following that some of those influencers already have is a strategy I'm trying to do, because this doesn't require me to go out into the world, be among people. I can do this all from a keyboard, email, and so forth, and do it that way. So those are some things I'm trying to do. I'm really trying to think outside the box right now. I have another book coming out, the actual prequel to this one, Super Problems, comes out in December of this year. And so like you guys, I was, beginning of 2020, I was just kind of gung-ho, like, yeah, this is my year. And it's like, oh, this is not looking like I thought it would. Okay. So I'm doing what I can, I think, like everybody else. And I think right now we just have to be creative. And, you know, I think like you alluded to, Jen, you know, we're in this technological age with the internet where we have options that we wouldn't have, you know, 20 years ago. So, you know, what can we do if we can't get in person together?
Great. Thank you, Jason. What about you, Dustin?
Sure. So one of the things you mentioned, Bryan, was how it affects you personally. And I have a 2- and a 3-year-old at home. And I usually I try to work at the library a couple of days a week. And I get a lot of writing done there. So that has been the biggest challenge, trying to write with 2- and 3-year-old barging in every couple minutes. It was a good thing I had my mute on for a while there, for instance. But it's been really nice to be around the house even more, and you know, to have the family time too has been really cool. So that's been a positive. One thing that I did with my book, which was turned out to be really nice, was I put, you know, my email address at the end, encouraged kids to write in and things like that. And so there's been a big uptick in kids and families taking advantage of that over the pandemic. So, you know, I've been able to Skype and do things with different families where it's not, you know, it's not blasting out to 1 million people, but it's nice to be able to make their day a little bit, to talk to them and have that personal connection. So that's been really nice. It was a bummer. I had a bunch of school visits in April that all got canceled. And so, you know, just this year, kind of trying to work with some of those schools, some different schools, doing virtual visits and, you know, doing whatever you can with that. And again, it's not going to be the biggest blast that you're going to get, but it is, you know, a little bit of a personal connection, and, you know, you get to do that little extra thing, and all that stuff is fun.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Well, I feel like all of you have some of the characteristics that you see in your writing, some of the characters that you write for, your resiliency, your adaptability, and your creativity. So I applaud you all. Dustin, why don't we start back with you in regards to a line of questioning in the sense of, why do you think that you've chosen to write for older children in regards to be it chapter books or something with a little bit more heft to it? What draws you to that age group and that method of writing?
Sure. I think one of the things right off the top is I still think like a 12-year-old or whatever. So that certainly helps. And, you know, a lot of my story ideas or things that come to me are just naturally fit for kids. I will say, you know, I heard somebody say before that, you know, your favorite books, you know, you'll never love a book more than the books you loved when you were 10 years old. And, you know, I don't know if that's true for everybody, but I know that's true for me. And I know that, you know, when I was that age, like I loved reading. You know, I loved adventure stories and funny books, and you know, it never left me like I want to write for that age group. So that's kind of, you know, why I chose it. You know, frankly, and also adult books are pretty long, and I don't want to write 100,000-word book, to be honest. So those are some reasons. You know, I think it's just a natural fit for me. I love talking to kids and things like that, and so you know, just all that works together. It's just, for me personally, I can't see myself doing anything else.
Great. Thanks, Dustin. What about you, Jason?
Yeah, you know, kind of similar. And I think I talked about it earlier, but, you know, kids that age that are in that kind of upper elementary up through 8th grade age, you know, they haven't lost that kind of inner child, you know, where they just delight in the absurd things of life, and they just laugh at like really silly stuff. You know, as we get older, we tend to lose touch with that a little bit. A lot of folks do, unfortunately. And that age group is still very much, you know, there. But getting sophisticated enough too, where they want a little more heft to the book in terms of like the plot, the character development. You know, they're looking for a little more meat in the story. And so as someone like me, who I cannot write poetry, I cannot write short stories, everything I write has to be longer than that. It gives me a good target audience for my work, because for someone like me who wants to write books that have chapters and, you know, take a little while to tell, but also at the same time still have a lot of that kind of comic, you know, silliness to it and fun. I think that it's a really good age group to write for. And I would say that, you know, it's something where I haven't really lost touch with it either, in terms of like kind of what it was like back then to be a kid. You know, haven't really forgotten about it. And in fact, I put a lot of my own childhood experiences into these stories. And Monster Problems, the main character gets in trouble for drawing too much in class and not paying attention. And that kind of sets off the whole story. And that's something that actually happened to me when I was a kid and got grounded for drawing, just like he does in the story. So I'm able to kind of infuse a lot of that into the story. And I think that gives it a little more authenticity. Like, these are things that, yeah, dilemmas that kids really run into. They're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to figure out what they're good at, and they're facing a lot of pressure. And so hopefully, you know, my books give them just a little bit of fun, entertainment, but also a way to kind of think through that and work through that and kind of show them that, okay, other people deal with the same kinds of things that I do.
Yeah. Thank you. How about you, Jenn?
Yeah, I'm kind of got a practical answer to this one, because I think a lot of the way that I feel about, you know, being a 12-year-old forever, like those things are true too, that everyone's been saying. But I was getting my MFA at Vermont College of Fine Arts, and I worked on a YA novel the first semester. I was so sure I was going to be a YA novelist because I was a teen librarian and I was just so immersed in that world. And second semester, I got paired with Rita Williams Garcia, and I had loved One Crazy Summer, and I'm like, if there's any time to like try something different, I'm like, I'm going to try writing a middle grade. I had this story where I had like 3 pages, and I'm like, well, we're just going to follow it from there. And that became my debut. And I did write like 1 YA novel since I've had an agent, but nothing's happened with that. Whereas every middle grade I've started has become something. So I think that's where I'm sticking for now. I think I am much or I also think that like being a teenager has fundamentally changed from when I was a teenager, but I think being an 11, 12-year-old hasn't changed as much, because those kids don't have access to all of the social media. And like, you know, my teenage years were all about like getting onto AOL and like, you know, connecting with friends that way, or other things that have just been fundamentally changed by cell phones and stuff. And like, what I love is that a 12-year-old might have a cell phone, but I definitely like understand how to use that, you know, in this world, because I don't really understand what it's like to constantly record like TikTok videos of myself or to like snap my friends. Like I don't get that. So it's 12.
So no TikTok dances tonight from you, Jenn?
No, I tried to discover TikTok early on in the pandemic with my friend Abby Cooper, who's a middle grade author, and we mostly made videos of our pets and like She was a little better at doing some. I'm not a dancer, so yeah, I'm like middle grade for sure.
Yeah, great. Thank you. How about you, Polly?
I didn't get into children's literature until I had kids. So I I'll see all these books in the library. And once we got past the stage where they were just pulling books off the shelves, I thought, well, gee, I bet I could read about picture books and find a list of books. And so we just got really into it. I read Owl Moon one night and like was ready to, my kids would stand up on the bed and start screaming when something really exciting was happening in a book. And I was ready to stand up on the bed and just say, this book is so good. Like the writing is just as good. Literature writing it's literary is where you find in any literary book, that you would think was literary, not a children's book. And so I just really got into it. I couldn't write picture books because picture books are too hard. It's like poetry, but like super poetry. And I got into middle grade, and I'm just to build on what some other people have said. I think the ages, you do have some sophistication, but you still have big kid hearts. And I won't even open my high school yearbooks. I don't want to think about it. I mean, not that anything was so terrible, but it just, I just don't want to relive it. I don't want to go back to being a teen. I'll write about kids or grown-ups. It's like I always used to say for teaching. I taught college English for a little while, so I teach that grade, or I teach kindergarten, or maybe a little bit older. I'm not sure I could do the middle stuff. So I guess that's just kind of naturally where I've drawn to. And I always did when I was writing for grown-ups. I wrote a lot about kids. So I guess there you go. So
natural progression.
Yeah.
And Tamara?
Yes, kind of like a little bit like Polly, and a little bit like Jenn. I actually, I wrote for adults for a while, and I wrote a column, and I wrote some adult nonfiction inspiration books. But all the while I was teaching high school, and I always say that I read one too many book report on Twilight one year, and I thought, oh, I should be writing for this area, and so I wrote a couple of manuscripts for the YA market, and it was before I had an agent, and I had one kind agent who didn't end up signing me, just say, I really like your voice, but I think would be better suited for middle grade. And I had been teaching high school for all these years, so I'd been reading high school things. And so I then started reading a ton of middle grade, and I fell in love with everything about middle grade novels. I'm in love with them. And I discovered this whole world. And that's where I ended up finding my voice and getting my agent and everything. So I'm so excited about that. The other reason I love it is because they're like sponges. They don't identify yet as, well, I only like this style of book. By the time they got up into high school, they were always telling me, as if they know, it's like, no, I'm not a reader, or I'm only reading this. And they were so set in their ways. I love the fact that the middle schoolers are still allowing themselves to grow into whom they're supposed to be. And I love that. And so I love to be a part of that journey too.
Absolutely. I hear a lot of teachers as well say the same thing, and why they love to teach those grades as well. So, yeah. Before we open up questioning, by the way, those out in the audience, if you would like to queue up questions, please either use our Q&A or the chat. Either way, we're going to be monitoring both of those. But Tamara, could you kind of, at least from my questioning, could you lead us out with what's next for you?
Oh yeah, and having just said that I love writing for middle grade, my debut picture book actually comes out in November of this year. So again, we didn't plan all this during the pandemic, but it is what it is. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. But it is a pandemic, and so we're hoping for the best for it. But I'm so excited. I was weaned on Dr. Seuss. I fell in love with reading and writing originally through Dr. Seuss. So before I even thought about anything else, I just always wanted to write poems. I wanted everything to rhyme. If it wasn't rhyming, I didn't think it was good. So I have finally written a picture book, and it's coming out from HarperCollins Christian, and it's called Lullaby Prayer, and it comes out in November. So I'm super excited about that. And I've just been finishing up a third middle grade novel, and this one is my first contemporary. So it was different to, like Jenn said, trying to like, oh, how do I work in cell phones and all these things, but it's been super fun to do as well.
Great. Thank you, Tamara. And Polly, how about you?
Well, I don't have too much to report. I'm
Yeah.
very slow, but I can tell you that the paperback of Itch will be out in May 2021. So if there's
Okay.
anything after that, I'll let you know. But that's what I got.
Thank you. And Jenn?
So I have a book coming out in, assuming I've never seen publishing, a lot of books are moving right now. And so, but for right now, I do have a book coming out in March with Simon & Schuster called Where We Used to Roam. And this is a story about, it's a coming of age story about a girl in Massachusetts where like everything is changing with her friends. And meanwhile, her brother, who she really idolizes, like sort of in the backdrop of the story, has become addicted to opioid painkillers, but nobody is figuring that out. So the book kind of begins, sorry, I'm doing a terrible job explaining this book, but think of when you realize you haven't actually talked about your book yet is happening in real time. Anyway, it's a book that deals with several different subjects, but I'm excited because part of it is set in Wyoming, where I spent a magical summer when I was in college, and so I put my main character, she spends the summer in Wyoming after this terrible school year where everything's gone wrong, including finding out what was going on with her brother. So, hopefully that'll come out in March. I'm getting ARCs any day now, which I'm excited about. It's the little things like waiting for the UPS truck to come that are keeping us going.
Exactly. Well, thank you for sharing, Jenn. And it sounds like another essential story. I believe that's what Hal Messner called it.
Yeah, actually, Alex Gino was the one that came up with that.
Oh, okay.
Essential reads. I like that.
Essential reads. Yeah. Thanks. And Jason, you alluded a little bit earlier. Would you like to share a little bit more?
Yeah, so there's a second book coming out. I had aspirations for this to be a series when I wrote them, but I wasn't sure if that would actually work out. I only had a contract for one book. So now that there's another one coming out, we're starting to brand them a Magic Pen Adventure. So this is Monster Problems, a Magic Pen Adventure. The next one is Super Problems, a Magic Pen Adventure, and draws on a different childhood experience, which is the general experience of moving to a different place and incorporating your friends into your the things that you're drawing. And different kid, different sixth grader, but gets the same magic pen delivered to him. And he draws all his friends into a comic book that he writes, and that all becomes real. And a couple of the same characters from Monster Problems are in it. You don't have to read them in a particular order to really understand them. You could read them in any order you wanted to, but there are some kind of through lines. The magic pens brought by a bird to your windowsill every time. There's an art teacher character who kind of shows up mysteriously as one of the teachers for the kid in the story, and ends up knowing a lot about the pen, and mysteriously so, but able to give advice and kind of be the wise kind of mentor figure kind of helping. And right now I'm writing book 3. It's in a very nascent stage right now. I wasn't working last year, so I had a lot of time to write. Now that I have a full-time job, trying to squeeze it in like a lot of people here and there. But off and running with that, and have hopes for that as well. So hoping for at least 3 of these Magic Pen books.
Wow, that's great. That's great. And you, Dustin?
Sure. So I talked about the Escape from a Video Game book that's coming out next week. I just turned in the manuscript for the second one of those. That'll come out in April, and that one was fun to do. It was it's like a murder mystery, which you don't get murder mysteries in middle grade because murder's involved. But it's a video game, and in video games you can die and it's fine. And so this one, it's a spaceship video game, and there's a group of people, and you're trying. And so it's choose your own adventure, and you're trying to figure out who the bad guy is among the group, and there's little mysteries throughout. So it's been a real headache to write, but I think it turned out pretty fun. So I'm excited for people to read it.
That's great. Well, again, thank you so much for all of you being here this evening. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions from the audience. The first one that we had was, do all of the authors write full time? And it sounded like Jason said that he's juggling a couple of different things. Yeah, well done. So maybe a show of hands of those are writing full time. And so, yep.
Writing is my full-time job, but I teach part-time English also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm home with 2 kids, so that's, especially since March, it's, you know, it's not a moment of peace, but so it is my job, but I got other stuff to do too. So.
Absolutely. Great. And then Cindy asks, how did you figure out how to write how did you figure out how to write dialogue that is up to date? Did you learn from beta readers?
I think one of the best hints for writing dialogue that I've ever heard is to read what you've written out loud. I think, first of all, it sounds different when you read it. So I make a habit of constantly reading things out loud, especially my dialogue. As far as like staying up to date, this is my first contemporary that I'm working on right now. And once again, I've like taken to Twitter to ask them. I don't have any 12-year-olds in my family right now. So I do a lot of polls about what is, you know, is it still cool? Is it rad? What is the word now? So that is where online, you know, different teachers and parents really, really help.
And I think for slang,
go ahead, Jen.
This is the challenge.
Go ahead.
You know, the challenge with middle grade is like with YA, the books move really fast, and so you can sort of use slang of the moment, but middle grade tends to have a longer shelf life. And so if your book is like published and then it actually is like hanging around in paperback for a while, like I try not to use, you know, slang that might be outdated in like 5 years. And so to try to craft, you know, language that's really specific to my characters. And also answering the question the way it was asked about the beta readers, I do think beta readers can be a really good ear for things, especially if they're ones that, you know, work in schools or have more access to like spending time around that age group. But that can be pretty helpful.
Something else I would recommend too is beta readers who are kids of the age group. Some of my friends' kids have actually read my manuscripts, a couple of them, who are big readers themselves, and you know, I can trust to give me good feedback. And between them and then my wife keeping me honest as well when she reads it, she's my best editor by far. And they can point out to me, you know, Mr. Lady, or in case my wife, hey Jason, you know, that's a slang term from the 1980s. You should take that out. That we don't say that anymore, and really kind of iron it out and take out all the stuff that's really going to date it and tie it to a particular era, and just try to make it as, you know, slang of the moment free as possible.
For me, it's just being around kids, listening to kids talk. I lead the kids church at my church, and so that leads to a lot of funny things that you hear kids say. You know, and just trying to keep it. I mean, kids, you know, don't speak in these big long sentences, and they don't generally make you know, these really eloquent points. You know, and so just thinking like a kid and talking like them, I think you know, it goes a long way.
I think it was Rebecca Stead who said she likes to walk through the park when all the kids are there and just try to overhear all the stuff that they're saying, and she's gotten so many good ideas that way. But you not in a creepy way. Be very careful when you do it. But
yeah, observation. Yeah. Let's see. We have Courtney asks, you all spoke a little about getting into the mindset of a middle grade protagonist. How do you choose the point of view for a story, and which is your favorite to write in? First person, etc.
You know, I've written in both first and third person, and the books that have been published are in first person. It just so happens, but I find that third person can almost be a little too expansive. Like I take that freedom and I run with it. And so it's hopping back and forth between all sorts of different groups of characters. Writing Monster Problems was the first time I wrote something in first person. I've written a decent amount of things in third person before that. And I found it refreshingly kind of linear. You know, it's all from this one person's perspective. Everything is filtered through what they're seeing and hearing, and everything that they're feeling and thinking. So it made it easier for me, honestly. And I became a fan of that point of view. And I didn't really think I would be, because I thought it would be very limiting, but it's limiting, but in a really good way, I feel.
Yeah, for me, I think that the manuscripts that I've written that aren't published are in third person. The ones that are published are first person. And I think for me, I know I just get deeper. I can find the voice better. I tend to get a narration voice that this wise old lady or something who's telling a story if it's in third person. So for me to find that voice of that 12-year-old, I need to be very personal and become first person.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I think for third person, if there's a lot more information you want to impart, or you aren't just sticking real close with that one character, then third person is going to be a good choice. I usually write in first person, then I read a couple books in third person, and I thought, uh-oh, I have to go change everything. So I don't know, but I think if first person's a good way to get to know your character.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I have my work in progress right now is primarily first person alternating between two characters, but I have like a thread that's set in the past where I did third person close, roaming between all these different characters that are then in the present time, like now they are adults, but that's like when they were children, sort of like This Is Us. And I found like it was an interesting exercise to write in third person because it comes so unnatural to me. I think largely because most middle grade contemporary is written in first person, present or past tense, and there's not as much written in third person, whereas like 30 years ago and prior, I feel like almost everything was in third person, so it's changing.
Yeah, I hadn't really written in first person until writing the middle grade books, and like Jason said, I did find it a little easier to get into the character's head, and just to keep it from one point of view, keep it very simple. For the choose your own adventure, those, the reader is the main character, so those are written actually in second person, and that was pretty weird to get into, but it does feel, when you're reading it and writing it, like it does. I found when going back and reading it and giving it to people, like it does feel very immersive, and which is pretty neat to see.
Great. Thank you. Well, we have time for one more question then. And it looks like it is kind of going a little bit deeper on, let's see, what's it say? Expanding on the beta readers question. Are you also encouraged to seek out sensitivity readers for hard topics? Do publishers help with that?
For my first novel, Walking with Miss Millie, I had an elderly African-American lady. And so we did have a sensitivity reader because that's a very dangerous thing. I didn't know it at the time. Ignorance was bliss, but not always. But I did end up with a sensitivity reader. And actually, I think the amazing Jacqueline Woodson was one of them. So I felt so much better to have that. It didn't solve all the problems that people might eventually find with it. But I think when you're writing, it's such a dangerous thing to write outside of your lane these days. And so, yes, sensitivity readers, if you have them, that's great. But if you don't, the publisher will get them for you.
Yeah, I haven't used a sensitivity reader exactly yet. But I know it's something that my agent is more encouraging of her authors to use. I think it's the most essential, like if you're writing a first person point of view from someone whose identity is different than yours, then I think it is like of the essence to do that. And then I think it's becoming more common to do that for secondary characters whose identity is different than yours, whether, gender or sexuality, or racial or other, or ableness.
Yeah, for me, when I wrote my books, like it's about a boy playing video games, so I got that, But part of the reason why I did that was because, like, I was just scared to write something other than what I know, And so, kind of as I move forward in my career, like I feel like I get more people reading the books, and I do feel like that is something that's actually a sensitivity reader is something that's, it makes me feel safer about trying other things, that you can send it to somebody and, they can point out things that you're missing. But things that I was scared to try, earlier in my career, I feel a little bit more, safe in moving forward with those things, knowing that I have that safety net of somebody reading it, that gets that other point of view.
Well, again, thank all of you for just a wonderful evening. This session has been recorded, so it'll live on. I'd like to, at this point, just give a strange virtual round of applause. So thank you. It was really an insightful evening. I think you gave a lot of great insights, both for future readers of your books as well as aspiring authors as well. So I think you covered a lot of ground tonight. So thanks again. With that, I'm going to invite Catherine from Ohioana. Oh, well, we're getting some, if you look in your chat, we're getting some nice feedback as well. We're getting some nice thank yous.
Thank you, Bryan.
Oh, well, thanks. I appreciate it. This is actually my first panel Zoom, so I appreciate all of you working with me and collaborating tonight. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, this has been such a fun conversation with everybody. It's been really great listening to you all and seeing all the lovely comments coming in from the attendees. So a huge thank you again to our panelists, Jenn Bishop, Dustin Brady, Tamara Bundy, Polly Farquhar, Jason Our Lady, and our moderator, Bryan Loar. It has been such fun hearing all of you talk tonight about your middle grade craft and publishing journey, and we super appreciate you taking your time out to share that all with us tonight. Thank you also again to all of the Ohioana Book Festival sponsors and partners, including Cover to Cover Books for Young Readers, and thank you all and the audience for joining us tonight. We hope you'll check out the Ohioana website for the full schedule of live and recorded panels and programming for the festival. You can find everything on ohioana.org and register for live events on Eventbrite. Thank you again, and good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much.
Good night.
Good
Nice
night.
to meet you guys.